All right, welcome back to another Conquest Corner on this, what I think absolutely will be a short episode. We're getting back to going through different units and all and reviewing them. I've been going through most of this for the Old Dominion. Now, there's essentially three boxes that are left to talk about. There's the box that'll be the Centaurs, there's a box that's going to be the Cultists and Assassins, as well as the Profane Sepulcher is the other one. I'm keeping off right now for the moment on the ones that are going to be coming out soon. The reason being is they very well might get a rules change or rules update before they do. We know that on, I don't know, every 3, say 4 months, I don't know if there's an exact timeline, they do some updates to different rules for different factions. The last grouping was Spires, 100 Kingdoms, and City States, I believe, was the other. I could be wrong on who the third one was. And we know that Wadroon are up, as well as potential Dominion, all of that. The most popular time for them to change rules on something is when the unit actually releases. And since they're the ones they're releasing soon, I don't want to discuss them, have them change drastically like some of the stuff did for Sorcerer Kings. And then I have a new video where I've discussed it and it's all invalidated. I have to record it again. So I'm going to wait on that. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I want to go through the Profane Sepulcher. Now, for this unit, it is not currently out. Obviously, if you're playing like in an official tournament, you can't bring unreleased models. But if you're just playing for fun, you absolutely can. Or you could start thinking about what you want to do. Or like, so when I play stuff, I bring whatever I feel like, because you should play for fun. You know, there's plenty of models that you can proxy it as. For me personally, I have some OCR Bone Reapers from the Age of Sigmar line. So I use the Gothazar Harvester is what I'm using for mine. Again, the size is not appropriate, but I just put them on a big base. Hey, it's something, so that way I can test it out a bit. My hope is to use it somewhat soon and kind of show off what its rules are now. Now, by the time it actually releases, the rules might be different. And I don't know if this is as much interest for unreleased models as it is for the ones that released. I don't know if I'll do this for all the other factions with the unreleased. But at least for now, I'm going to do it with Old Dominion because that's the army I play the most. So I feel I can still talk about what this model does and how I would incorporate it, even though I don't know when in an official format to be able to. But again, when I'm playing on like a Friday night or Saturday or Sunday, actually we play pretty much between Friday to Sunday, this game. When I'm playing, I bring whatever I feel like, you know, have fun. It's not a tournament. So keep in mind though, if you actually do have an official model of this faction or any others that you actually want to pick up, we do have a discount code put below. Terrain Kickers is the code. There's a link for it as well. It saves you 10%, helps out the show as well. Especially of importance right this moment while supplies last, they are doing those double army bundles, which are saving about 60 or so off the bat. Our code can save you more. And then we've done a few videos how to get that to a reasonable 2K list using everything in that box with another unit or two in general. And then you're fully in the game for honestly a pretty cheap price, all things considered. So I know certain other games are theoretically cheaper, but in reality, even those games, like I play Marvel. Oh, you can get in with just 10 models. Yeah, but you're going to get a few more things. You're going to start varying it up. Same sort of thing here. You'll start stacking up some of those costs. But here you can actually get into this game for honestly cheap. But let's get into talking about that unit. So, for anyone who hasn't watched one of these before, we're going to talk about the unit itself, talk about how I see it in the army, strengths, weaknesses, all those sorts of things. Now, this is an unreleased model. Since it's unreleased, let's be honest, the rules are usually, I find for the unreleased stuff, either absolute insanity, not often, or underwhelming. And that's honestly for the best. Underwhelming is probably for the best because you don't want people, one, they could still be working on it, testing it, because you can't necessarily play test every little thing all at once. It doesn't really do well that way. If you're testing something, you should, from a statistical perspective, have this idea of controlling variables. So you don't want to bring 5 different brand new things, go into a game, do well, if you can't critically analyze what worked well, what didn't, maybe you did well in the game, why did you do well? Was it really this thing? Maybe it did something good, but if you had removed it and put something in its place, would that have done the same sort of thing? Was it maybe not strong enough or too strong? So you usually want to add a little bit in. So that means that this thing might not have been tested quite as much for the moment, and more so when it's actually ready to be dropped. So I think we're going to find a little bit underwhelming. Not bad, but a little underwhelming, and I think that's absolutely okay, especially until we actually see it. So this Sepulcher, it's a medium monster, so that means on the giant base, much like the Fallen Divinity, those are actually our only 2 monsters. 270 points, so points-wise up there for monsters. We'll talk about afterwards what I think might change. Move 5, so rather slow. We're talking, Siegebreaker sort of levels now. Clash of 2, that's very in line with what Old Dominion tends to get. We tend to get lower Clash. Mostly, I think partially because we don't resolve, so our Clash tends to be a little lower. It is 8 attacks with 36 wounds, the most wounds imaginable. 3 defense, 2 evade. Monsters with 2 evade, I've seen this many times in either playing with my Bucephali or watching other people play Bucephali, who also are evade 2. That is really frustrating because it means I always have almost my full save. Yeah, the save if you don't have any cleave is 3, but if you're getting this thing, you probably have something. But I'm always on a 2. And when I don't resolve, that's actually very defensive. That's probably closer to a 3 or maybe even a little bit better when you think about it versus someone who has a save and a resolve. We'll go through special rules real fast and then we'll talk about Straw Event because that's why you bring this thing. It is Devout. Keep in mind, for Devout, it's when you're targeted by a priest. It doesn't say friendly. So if an opponent's priest has something it targets you with, it also converts a failure to a success. For this thing in our army, there's not a lot of spells that you would actually want to be casting on it. Mostly because Unhallowed Ground says you can't be healed. If you could be healed, then Devout is great because I'm effectively always going to get my heal off, which will correspond to the level of the Dark Power pool. But that's not true. It is size 2, which is helpful in terms of can it be seen or not, because some things are a bit bigger and they can be seen easier. So he's a little bit harder to see, especially if you got some of our Cav type options or Brute options. And it's 5 stands for securing objectives, which is quite a few stands. So he actually can take objectives from people, or he can take them with them still having something there. But because he can't heal, you're not really looking at a lot of spells that you want. That you want cast on him. We'll get into those a little bit. He's Animate Vessel, of course. He's Terrifying 1. And we already talked about what Unhallowed Ground was. Actually, very briefly, 4 spells you put on him. Let's open up Dark Amendrite. The Hierodeacon can't help. The Hierodeacon spell is either target self for more power or hit the opponent. You can't Hazley's Touch because you can't heal. You can do a Dark Immolation to give yourself some Aura of Death related to the pool, so you could have, between Aura of Death, say 2 to 4. Since Aura of Death is based off of how many of your stands they're touching, it's not a lot of damage, but it is a little bit. And I have, with my Sorcerer Kings lately, I've had a few times, because they can get to Aura of Death too, where that was only like 4 or 6 hits, but it was just enough to take someone down or take a stand off, which makes a very big difference. So that is something. Blasphemous Power, if you want to count its tiers higher. If you can get it, since it doesn't actually have a Memory of Old, you would want to get it to either, say, tier 3, so you're inspired, or at your max. Oh, excuse me. I wasn't yawning all day while I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, but hey, that happens. Or you'd want to get it to that max to give it Flurry and Decay 2, because it doesn't care about Decay 2, has 36 wounds. But the Flurry, especially on Clash 2, but let's think about it. If you had the Flurry, you'd be on Clash 3 because you've already maxed out, which means you're at least tier 3. So you are inspired. That means now you're at least much more reliable. And the other one is Unholy Baptism. That is targeting an opponent. So there's only 2 spells you actually want to cast on this thing. There is a chance that having Devout kind of works against it in certain ways, but hey, that's fine. It makes sense. Like I said, it's a sepulcher moving around, so I'm honestly really curious what this thing's going to look like when it finally drops. But let's talk about its draw event. This is why you take it. This is why it's got 36 wounds. Exorant of Eternal Faith. So when it goes, it performs a draw event. Memory, not memory old. You're guaranteed this happens. It's your draw event. First things first, all of these take wounds. Now, at the bottom they tell us you have to be able to take the full wounds that the ability or that you choose does, wherever that thing does. If it doesn't have enough wounds remaining, then then the ability cannot take effect. And suffering wounds as a result of this draw event can cause the enemy regiment to be destroyed. So what that means is, if it requires 6 wounds to go off and you only have 5, you cannot do it. But by wording, if it requires 6 wounds to go off and you have 6 wounds, yes, you may. But it would destroy you. Especially of theoretical use is the one that means that you can take wounds and the opponent takes auto hits. You could do that to your wound profile if your wound profile is low enough. So, things this does: you can take 6 wounds, so you can lose 1/6 of your life. No resolve. All of these are no resolve. It makes sense. It has no resolve stat anyway. You get +4 attacks. You gain inspired and cleave 1. You will notice for a monster, base stats, this thing is underwhelming. Very, very underwhelming. Especially for 270. But average monsters now are about 16 or so wounds at time of filming this. So with this guy, to go down to, say, 30 wounds, you can get 12 attacks, which is a respectable amount of attacks, closer to monster-type stats. You'll have Inspired, which is important since you can't choose to Inspire naturally, and Cleave 1 so you actually can get through people. So you could be 12 attacks on 3s with Cleave 1. That's an actual monster profile. Again, it's still a little underwhelming. I would suspect, maybe because of the size, maybe it won't. But I would expect a few things to come out for this. Okay, so a little bit of a pause there. I'll pick up essentially where I was. We were talking about some bit of the stats here, and also, like I said, you spend 6 wounds, you can now get the 12 attacks, be inspired like a lot of other people, so hitting on 3s with that cleave of 1. That's getting you closer to a monster stat line. Still not exactly, though. A lot of times monsters will have like something like impact hit, whether or not they have brutal impact, but at least impact hits. You might have, or some of the newer ones now have things like trample or a natural or a death, something extra. This guy's kind of missing a little bit of the extra, but he can buff some other things, so maybe it's appropriate. Other options: you can take 6 wounds, no resolve, of course, and a target friendly regiment within 8 inches counts as being under tier 3 of the Dark Power pool. So remember, tier 3 is the level at now you get your memories of old astral events. You may also use them as actions, and you're inspired. So you can absolutely use those things to kind of stack yourself up as much as you like. To that level. Again, it is 6 wounds. It's a good amount of wounds, but there is times when you absolutely need that, especially as an army that can't naturally inspire. If you get trapped in, then your numbers to hit are usually a bit lower. So this could give you, one, some of your tier bonuses if you're not at the tier you need. Maybe you're not even at tier 2 yet. Or it at least gives you inspired if you're already stuck in. So, another one. This one takes 4 wounds. No resolve, of course. Friendly command stands within 12 get +2 attack characteristic. So the command stands that are within 12 inches, you get 2 extra attacks. Now, that one sounds pretty big, but luckily they kept it pretty cheap because it's not as useful as it sounds. Here's the reason why. Unlike a lot of other armies, our brutes don't have command stands. So when you look at different brute units, you'll notice that they don't have any leaders. Same thing with the Canophores, Caratids, they don't have any of that. Cataphracti, okay, so there's one that has it because it has the command stand. Your light things like your cares and stuff do not have that. Moroi do not have that. So we only have it if it's essentially a human. So, it would be good for things like your Varangian Guard. It would be good for things like your Nathati. Your Centaurs do have them, so once they're out, that helps it as well. But part of that one, again, it's pretty cheap points-wise, or wounds-wise, I should really say, because there's a good amount that can't benefit from this that you might be bringing, which might be the ones that you want. The other option is that you take up to 12 wounds, no morale, of course, and an enemy of your choice within 10 inches takes that many wounds at armor piercing 1. There's no morale for this, but it does count as flank, so if they have rules that would buff them from the front, like shields and all that, phalanx, they don't get any of those. So that is a pretty good way to clear someone out, especially if they only have maybe a few stands left, or they're beating out what you want, say, on an objective, and you can just pump enough in to take them down. You do have 36 wounds to start with, so I could absolutely see if you're looking at. So the other day when I was playing against Steve, I went against a unit that was like a 2 defense, but shield, phalanx, all these special buffs and everything like that. And instead, now you're on 1s instead of like the 4s you were on before. Now I'm actually going to start tearing down stands. For someone whose defense comes from a variety of buffs, this is actually a really good spell. I could see using, depending on how many you want. I don't know if I'd always use the 12. That's a third of its life. But depending on where you're putting it, since it's a little bit more of a support monster, I could see doing, 6, 7, 8, or like I said, maybe 8 is a good amount, because that's enough to be able to probably take down a stand or two, depending on what you're talking about, or at least maybe in one stand. Maybe that's enough then to be winning out what you need, or to break that unit because they'd previously taken a couple stands, or maybe even shatter them. If they have two, they're already broken, say 2 stands left, I only really need to take out 1. I'll go with a little bit extra. Notice they are auto hits, so you don't have to roll to hit. So you can play a little bit more with averages. Oh, they're on 2s to save this. Okay, so that means, I should hit them about 6 times. That should be enough to do it. Maybe I'll give myself a little bit of a bonus. Like, since you don't have to roll to hit, you have a little bit more expectation of what's going to happen. So for this model, this is what you bring it for. You don't bring it for its attacks. Although, like I said, it can get the 12 attacks inspired with a cleave of 1, which is fine. Its other abilities, you're bringing it because of what it can do for others. It itself is not the dealer of damage, except maybe with that 3rd ability. Because like I said, it's lacking its own natural cleave. It's lacking a good amount of attacks. It doesn't really have a good to hit. It doesn't have a natural aura death. It doesn't have impacts or tramples or those sort of things. I mean, who knows? It might get something like that in the future. But for what it has now, it is absolutely meant to be a sort of buff piece. The problem I have is that some of those buffs aren't quite as good. The counting as tier 3 is very big. I'll tell you right now, one thing I do with my Cataphracti is I have the Archimandrite nearby, so she can buff them to a minimum tier 2. So that way they can get their memories of old, because they have the Hyratos and all of that, so they can do their big amounts at people. This thing guaranteeing them a different way to get to it means that my Hierodeacon can now, my Archimandrite can now do different spells. She doesn't have to actually buff the tier that they're counting as and all of that. So that gives you an option there. This thing then does actually get to go. So it could then go and engage someone or do something. Its speed is going to become a little bit of a problem. I not that I would necessarily run it this way, but I do like its thought process with the divinity. Because one of the downsides of Fallen Divinity is you have to look at units that don't care about their tier, because you're not going to get it, because you're going to pump it straight to Divinity. Here's a way to put some tier into them. Here's a way to stack on to some of those command stands, like say if you're taking Varangian Guard, Nathati, anything like that. As well as just getting flat out damage onto people that might be a problem, especially if you have a unit that might actually contend against her. This is something then that could help you out with that. It counts as 5 stands, so you can now have something else to grab objectives for you. If you're worried about survivability, you have to use ability. Choose one. Okay, so you do choose one. So you could always just choose the bottom one and do like 1 wound if you are worried about your wounds. But it is choose one. There is none of this choose nothing. But if you're worried about people being able to actually chew through it, because your goal is to sit and keep an objective, you could just deal 1 wound a turn. Or, sorry, deal 1 hit, 1 wound to yourself per turn, just to make sure that that's clear. So, I haven't run it yet. I do want to run it. Like I said, I have a model I'm going to proxy for it. Maybe, I don't know if I have a chance this weekend. If not next weekend, maybe I can do that and hopefully try to record it. Hopefully have it actually work. Unfortunately, like last time when it didn't. For lists, I would put it in the Fallen Divinity. That makes it expensive, but I think it gives a buff there. I just don't know if 270 is too much to pay for the buff that it would give. Probably depends on what the other units are. Else would I want to put with this thing? Honestly, I've always been with Strategos as my warlord. Lately, because the supremacy is just that good. Could someone else be? I could see if you're taking this, maybe you start going to a little bit more of the undead type stuff. So you take an Archimandrite, even maybe as your warlord, get 2 spells. 1 spell goes to this to give it a little bit of that buff. Let it count its tiers higher. So that way then it can buff other people. Or, is there any other? No, there's no other reason it would want any of the other things really put together. And then still cast a spell out, so heal someone else. Put a Dark Immolation onto it. That could work. Other particular. I would think if you're taking this, to keep a little bit cheaper with some other things. So I'd be bringing obviously Legionnaires and all. I think this army needs to lean into Legionnaires either way. But I don't know. I like the idea. I just feel it's lacking something, and I'm not sure what. Now maybe it's maybe this mechanic would really make it sing. I'm not entirely sure. I just feel, it needs to be support. And you know what? Maybe that's not bad in this army because we have a lot of hitters. We have Bucephaly, which are a big hitter. Varangian Guard, which are a big hitter. Anatheti are another type of big hitter. Yeah, they don't cleave through, but they'll just throw enough dice at you. Go against people with evade there. When your centaurs come out, they have some options. Cataphracti are big hitters. Your cares can be, especially if they survive to late game. Ooh, actually, that's not bad. Because their memories of old is priest +1. So even if you have a big block of cares, if you count them as tier 3, now they get their +1 stand, and then they could essentially use it as an event, as an action to get +2, 3 a stand. Well, now if you have a little 4-pack, now they're at 12. Throwing 12 dice of insanity. Now notice though, it's the amount of extra wounds you take is the tier of the dark power pool. That's not the tier you're experiencing. It's the actual tier of the pool. But if the tier of the pool is at least, say, tier 2, now every 6 is 2 extra wounds. You can actually do a lot of good. I've seen that when you get to the higher tiers, just what it does to people. But this is a way to start getting a little extra damage in early, so maybe that's not a bad plan. I don't know. I like it. I haven't seen, as I go through the list, like where absolutely do I put it? Actually, there. It puts around with a thing. Call list, because I never created a name in my list. So let's start with Archimandrite. Oh, actually, one thing we didn't mention is who actually takes it, and that's the Archimandrite. So my apologies, I don't know if I mentioned that, but that's actually where we're taking it. So you're taking Archimandrite for sure. I don't believe anyone else can take it. Of course, now I have this open. Yeah, I checked real fast. It's just the Archimandrite. That's what I thought. For Archimandrite, yeah, I'm going to make it the Warlord for the moment. I'm going to run a very different type of list than I normally do. For Dark Blessings, I'm going to go Unholy Mastery, because then you get another spell. Do I want to do that? Do I want 3 spells? You could always heal someone. You could always put or a death on someone and count someone up as a higher tier. Or blast someone with Unholy Baptism so for some damage. So you know what? Yeah, I like that. I think that's kind of fun. If I'm going all that, then I'm going to go Consecrated Mire, so that way she can get extra Priest 7, but depending on the level that you get more dice. So realistically, you're looking near the end, PB rolling 11 dice, you're getting a lot of things through. That can guarantee your heals, and only Baptism then does a bunch of damage. And why not? If we're going crazy, let's go crazy. She needs a unit of Legionnaires to stand in. I'm going to keep them nice and cheap. The only other thing I might do, obviously standard, because that's free. They're going to be sitting back, probably grabbing an objective. So if you want, that's where things like Dark Cenotaph. So an extra point when you're seizing an objective. If you're worried about your power, that's an option. Otherwise, I'll probably keep it cheap. Maybe because of their position, maybe put 1 more in there to make it a little bit more survivable. For other pieces, with the Sepulcher, maybe you're less worried about getting to the higher tiers early. Otherwise, I would go with Higher Deacon for sure. When Cultists are out, I'm going Higher Deacon Cultists. You know what? Since we're kind of playing with things that aren't quite yet, I'm going Higher Deacon Cultists, because then I can get my Higher Deacon working earlier. I'm not going to bother putting anything on the Higher Deacon, because the Higher Deacon's only goal is to stand there and get Dark Shepherd off. That's it. I don't care about anything else. Well, sorry, you do have some other things. So you can give someone Blessed. No, I'm in the right thing. Undying Devotion. Oh, yeah, I forgot. They added these in. My apologies. So target friendly until then, each time a stand in that regiment is destroyed, add power. They said, or Benediction of Black Sun, you can give someone Blessed, a friendly brute regiment. Ooh, so do I want that then? My apologies. I completely forgot they added those 2 spells. So what? I'm going to take off the Consecrated Mitre from here. I'm going to put that on the Higher Deacon. And I'm putting it there because, 1, better shot to make sure I get off my uh, Dark Supplication. And later, when I no longer need it, now I can go into this Benediction or Unholy Devotion. The other option then, I did put it for 3 spells here. If you think it's better to get more spells from the Hierodeacon, you could absolutely vary that up. The 1 spell is not always average. Ooh, so do I want to change that? I want to heal someone for sure. You know what? No, I like that. I think it's fine either way, but I do like that. Other things in there, I'm going to put Unit Bucephaly because they can be buffed. Bucephaly I'm running as a 4-pack minimum. I don't like less Bucephaly. They still do fine, but I don't like less. For other things, what else might want to run in this? You could take a Cares unit, take them at 4 stands. That's a good amount, keeps them around. If you want to lean into what you're doing here, you can now grab some Bone Columns. You could kind of really go into that sort of non-human list. I do like Bone Columns overall, especially with maybe some of the buffs we can give because they are brute. Giving Bone Columns Blessed is huge because their clash isn't great, but they have there's Relentless Blows. So now you can absolutely get some extra bit through. They have their base aura Death. They have a Cleave too. It's a little 3-pack of them. Those I'm not too worried about getting much more. I think it's fine with 3. We got about 500 spare points. So what do we want to do at 500? Options there. You could either go Tigos to be able to get something in with him, or you could go Ziliarch. Kind of depends on what you feel is lacking. I need more things that want to sit and score. Tigos on foot's a little bit cheaper. You could take the mounted to be able to get some Cataphracti in. You could go with a small unit Cataphracti. With him, I could take some more Legionnaires. We're at 1880. The Cataphracti. Give him a standard. I'll give him a Hyratos. You got about 90 points spare. You could put something in with him if you want. I'm not too worried about getting crazy with that, but you absolutely could. That's an option. Nothing isn't bad because it gives him Line Breaker. And the character gets more cleave. One of the issues that Cataphracti have is once they get locked in, they don't really do much, so you could go with that. With that spare 90, much else you could do. What you could do, keeping it cheap, you could just put in a unit Cultist. That gets you to enough points, or could add a little something else. So with the Sepulcher, I'm looking at the Sepulcher to buff the Cataphracti early, to be able to get them their bonuses. Actually, maybe what I'll do, I'll add an extra in. I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. Actually pretty good. That's pretty good. With that spare 25, I want hit 25. Long Lineage is about the only one you can take, but that doesn't help because that's just take extra stuff. Combat. 25 could take Gladiator. Against Flurry, Deadly Blades, and Parry. Treasures. 17 armor. Regiment Gaining Tenacious would be pretty good. They're kind of tough to take down, but they have very few wounds, so that would actually be pretty big. Calamitous, extra attack and cleave. Ready get one more clash, and then bonuses on duel. No, Calamitous. Taking that because cleave somewhere in this is good. You now have 7 attacks on a 3. You will actually get some wounds through because Cataphracti, once they're in, don't get wounds through. They really struggle with that. You will have to be more careful, though, because this one's not the Warlord. So you have to line it up correctly if you're going to use the Hyratos double hits. However, still going to do some work for you. Like I said, I would think Profane Sepulcher early, buffing Cataphracti. Hierodeacon is, gaining power until one of your brutes is ready to go. Once one of your brutes is ready to go, bless either one. I don't care which one. Just bless the one that you can reach. I'll probably try to aim more for the Bone Golems personally. Just because, actually, they're both the 4 attacks, but they hit worse, so they probably needed a little bit more. The Cares unit, Profane Sepulcher, is also going to be buffing that, so maybe very, very early while I'm getting Cataphracti set up, buff them so I can actually get a really good Insanity hit onto someone. Archimandrite is healing whoever the Hierodeacon removed a unit of, so healing up one of the other bits. Probably Unholy Baptism when it gets a chance, because that's 12 inches, be able to get some shots onto someone. And then Immolating or Blasphemous Power. And in this, there's nothing wrong that doesn't say you can't use both. So that means the Sepulcher could buff one unit, counting it as tier 3 if you want to do it that way. And then Blasphemous Power could do another one. So it's only one higher, but that at least gets you to the 2 when you need it. Or if you're in 2, get you to the 3, get you that Inspired. That will really help out a unit like Bucephaly or even especially, say, Bone Golems. Other things that I would have it use. Actually, the command stance I don't care about. That's really not helping. The flat wounds is probably the other big thing. I'm probably trying to time it where I get to a position where 12 AP1 auto hits is really going to dish damage onto someone. Great. They're sitting on objective. Like I said it's a 10-inch range, so they're near the objective. I'm either not on it yet, can't get to it, or I'm losing out on it. Smack you, remove most or maybe that whole unit, depending on how well I do. But that's the way I'm kind of looking at that. All right, so that's a very quick list build. I don't know if it's actually a good list. I think I can run this. I have everything for it. Obviously, I don't have the Sepulcher, but I have something as a stand-in. And I could just what I normally do, I proxy my Praetorians as cultists. So I think I'm going to do that as well. So maybe, actually, this will be the next list that I run. And like I said, I will try to tape it. That's my goal to do so. But we've had some issues with that lately. I'm going to try again. But if I can actually get it taped, then you guys can actually see it, and we'll see how it performs. Do I think it'll do great? Probably no. But I think it's got legs, and I think it looks fun. And at the end of that, that's what I'm playing the game for. I'm not playing for trying to do the most tooled out things at all times. I want to test stuff out and try some weird things. Especially here, I haven't run the Archimandrite as my leader in quite a while. And I haven't run like Cares in a bit and all of that. I like the look of this because it's very different from when I run, and it doesn't have some of the bigger hitter things that I usually like. So I want to see if I can make the other ones work. All right, well, that'll do it for us on this particular reasonably short episode here. Keep in mind, if you're looking to pick up anything for Conquest, we do have that code in the show notes below. We have a link, and the code itself is Terrain Kickers. Like I said, saves you 10%, helps out the show as well, helps us to be able to do things like hopefully more battle reports. And like I said, we tried to film it the other day. Unfortunately, there were some audio issues. I'm going to try again. My hope is to try again this upcoming week. If not, then I'm off. And once I'm off, can try a lot easier. So I hope to start doing some of that, as well as some additional Conquest content. I'm going to reach out to some of the locals around to do some list building episodes around the other factions that I just don't play as much. I want to be able to talk to people who are a little bit more experienced with it, and maybe they can give different takes than I have. So keep in mind right now, if you are trying to pick it up, they are running those very, very good deals of 2 army boxes, almost for the price of 1 if you use our code as well. So now's a great time to get into this game. And we're going to see. Do I think they'll change this unit much? Maybe not. Maybe it's fine the way it is. It is more utility, and I think you have to look at it as a pure utility monster rather than a monster. And maybe that's the part that's a little bit tough to sort out right now. I don't know. We're going to see. Once I try it out, maybe I'll have a better impression of if I think it's okay with the way it is. All right, well, that's all we have to say on this one. So, have everyone on the show. Has a good hobbying. It's a great gaming.